Hello and welcome to another update. In this one, I'll be covering the latest updates on the Ukrainian summer offensive as well as the general changes on the front line. Starting out, we have a video from Mariinka, where here by the front line within the city, there is some drone footage from a deep state map, which shows some drones flying over the destruction of Mariinka, detecting a few soldiers and then launching shells at them. Then here to the south of Mariinka in the direction of Pobieda and Novomikhailivka, the Russian forces started some attacks and gained a little bit of ground here in the fields, trying to advance in the direction of Novomikhailivka or generally just flanking in the direction of Pobieda. So either towards the south or towards the west. Could also be taking down this road here by the center, leading down from Mariinka down to Novomikhailivka, allowing them to attack Novomikhailivka from both the south and the north. Then we have this image here by Ryber. There they have analyzed all of the combat footage we've seen so far from the Ukrainian summer offensive and analyzing all of the Ukrainian losses through them, of which they have detected that the Ukrainians have lost 72 armored vehicles and 26 tanks, of which the armored vehicles there are 12 plus 3, so 15 M2A2 Bradleys, 7 Mastiffs, 8 Max Pros and 1 Humvee, of which the tanks there are 13 Leopard 2s, 3 AMX-10 RCs and 4 T-72 M1. I've not seen all of the combat footage, however this aligns pretty well with what my expectations are. 100 armored vehicles as well as tanks being lost is not really that significant for the Ukrainians, but based on the fact that this is only probing attacks, it actually seems to be a lot. And we see that based on the fact that although the Ukrainians have received a lot of tanks, for example, losing 13 Leopard 2s, that is still about 10 to 15% of what they've received. So losing that much, not that they've used that much, but they've lost that much, is pretty crazy. Considering if we take into assumption that there's a few losses that is not caught on camera, as well as the fact that they use more than they have actually lost. So we can expect the Ukrainians to have used between 20 to 25% of their forces so far, and yet they've only managed to capture a few villages south of Velikonovosilka as well as Lobkove. So although they have few losses in comparison to what they actually have, comparing that to the amount of progress they have had, it is an unsustainable rate of losses. And then we have this footage here, which was shared by War Monitor, and in this footage we can see that there is a Ukrainian Humvee that drives over a anti-tank mine, and it blows up. There is a crew that survives, but some do not. As such, I'll not be showing the footage. However, we see that although there has been cleared mines in this area, there are still some left over, so you cannot always be completely sure. It's a very tough situation for these forces to drive through these areas. In other news, the Ukrainians managed to capture Lobkove again. So after it's been captured by Ukrainians and then the Russians recaptured it, and then it turned into a gray zone for a couple of days. Now the Ukrainians have hold of it. So the Ukrainians are continuously attempting to fight in this direction, similarly to how they're attacking here to the south and southeast of Oryhiv, not only capturing this part here, but also expanding slightly here to the southwest, and at the same time advancing eastwards from the Novodanilivka area in the direction of Novopokrovka. So the Ukrainians are continuously attacking in this direction in these open fields on a constant artillery fire and constantly being shot at by Russian armored vehicles, anti-tank gun missiles, and air force, as we see in this video here with a Ka-52 helicopter shooting at Ukrainian positions from a distance very far from the front line, as they have a significant range of up to 10 kilometers with their laser-guided missiles, which in connection with drones firing these laser guidance on the targets makes them very accurate. So this K52 helicopter flies up, shoots the rockets from a distance of up to 10 kilometers, and then the drone's just allowed to hit pinpoint accuracy. So the biggest killer of Ukrainian vehicles, number one is anti-tank mines, number two is anti-tank guns, and the third one is Ka-52 helicopters. The fourth one is artillery. So although most infantry casualties comes from artillery, from armored vehicles themselves it is more difficult because not necessarily one artillery shell will be able to destroy them, and they are not exactly accurate enough to shoot down every armored vehicle. In comparison to infantry, where the area of effect is much larger, the anti-tank gun missiles, the Ka-52 helicopters and anti-tank mines are almost a sure hit kill when it comes to armored vehicles. And as such, we also have this footage here of an ATGM being deployed on the Zaporizhzhia front. Not exactly sure where on the front line, but we see here that they are using it from a very far distance. You can hardly tell. So essentially this offensive so far, the clear defining factor as to who is having the advantage is clearly whoever detects the other side first. And considering the Ukrainians are on the offensive, it is much easier for the Russians to detect them, because they just have to check out specific areas around the clock and they'll be able to detect them. While the Russians are on the defensive, they can easily rotate their forces in different directions, allowing them to be unspotted. So the Ukrainians have a harder time detecting the Russian forces because they don't necessarily have to stay at one point, while the Ukrainians have to have specific areas that they have to push through, which is here to the south of Novodanilivka, east of Mashka. It is very clear where they're going to be fighting from because they have this armored vehicle convoys that they have to push through. So the Russian forces easily detect them with the drones as well as the UAVs. So in comparison, the Russians have the advantage by being on the defensive, which allows them to detect the Ukrainians first. So generally, over the past few days, the Ukrainians had reached a stalemate, but then they started pushing again here to the west and east. They stopped pushing after the 13th, which is 3 days ago. So in the past 3 days, there's been no advances by the Ukrainians here on the eastern side. As for the central side, they managed to capture Lukove yesterday, and then we have seen some of these advances, although small, they have been doing some south of Orikhiv. So generally, the Ukrainians seems to have lost a lot of their momentum from the start. They have been unable to advance further, and generally the situation doesn't look that good for them, as they continue to lose a lot of equipment, yet do not have anything to show for it, as they've still not managed to reach the first defensive line of the Russian forces. So far, all we are seeing is a graveyard for all of the Ukrainian equipment, while the Russian forces just continuously hold them back and prevent them from even reaching the first line of defense. So this must be a heavy hit for the morale of the Ukrainian soldiers, because being unable to see any results after so many losses and over 10 days of fighting must be devastating. Something we also have to take into account is the constant use of the Lancet and Shahed drones by the Russian forces as well. This allows them to not only detect the Ukrainian forces, but also to attack them at the same time. So it is a 2-in-1 device. They can use the Lancets to detect all of these convoys, to detect all of these units, and at the same time they'll use them to attack the weak point of that convoy, especially if they can attack the first or the last vehicle, especially if they can clear the tank clearing, the mine clearing tanks. So there's a lot of options with these drones, and they're very cheap, which allows them to essentially be very powerful. So what we've seen a lot is that the Ukrainian forces try to camouflage important units such as artillery, anti-air defense, all of these things. But the drones fly around and detect these areas, and then they just attack them. Like we see here in this footage with an M777 artillery howitzer being attacked and destroyed by a Lancet drone here in the Zaporizhzhia front. But the Russians aren't the only ones with the drones. Here we see a Russian 1L259 Su-Park-1 counter-battery radar being taken out by multi-launch rocket systems of the Ukrainians after it was detected by a Ukrainian drone. So these drones showing and detecting the opponent's vehicles allows each side to take accurate hits and destroy the equipment. So in the end, what we see that is the most effective and most important in warfare is being able to detect the opponent's units. If you know where they are, you can always build up a plan to take them down. And that is all for this update. Thank you for watching and have a great day.